So she has done it. Okay, thanks, Scott. Take it away.
No problem. The VCP is a transition program for military veterans. We serve a dual mission. The first is to help veterans find employment after service. And either, that can be anything from, like I said, finding employment to going back to school and helping build their career from there. The second is to rehabilitate archaeological collections administered by the Army Corps of Engineers. And we have labs all over the country. I'm, as I said, based out of Alexandria, Virginia. Part of our process is, the collections come to us in all sorts of various states. We sort of rehabilitate them, get them in long-term, get them ready for long-term storage. And part of that is creating digital catalogs for all of the collections, as well as taking museum quality photographs of a portion of the collection. So if you have more questions, if anyone has questions about the VCP and sort of what we do, feel free to reach out afterwards, and I'd love to let you know more about sort of what we do. So photography at the VCP is, as I said, part of our process to make these collections available to future researchers. Each collection we get, we take a representative sample of 5 to 10% of the collection. The exceptions to that are, small soil samples, sort of botanical samples, things like that, that aren't going to take a good photo, as well as, you're not really going to need to see what a soil sample looks like necessarily to understand what's in it. But the reason we take photos is, as I said, we do prepare digital catalogs with each collection. The 5 to 10% of photos is ideally going to give future researchers an easy way of seeing sort of what's in the collection and get an idea before they actually try and pull the collections from the repositories that they eventually end up in. So to take photos in the lab, we have 2 photography stations. Both are located in an enclosed section of our lab to provide greater control of the light sources. We have a standing station and a tabletop station. They're both located in the same photography lab that has, it's really just sort of a closet that we have set up, which is very, very nice if you're looking for a nice, relaxing day of taking photos. Each station has the same equipment, same everything. We have 2 setups for, before COVID, when we could have 2 people within 6 feet of each other taking photos at the same time, as well as providing folks, who might not be able to stand for an entire day. We have a seated station as well. The basic setup for our stations are a Canon EOS Rebel DSLR, a studio stand light, a camera stand, a bottom light, and a large clear sheet of plexiglass. We then will, so this is sort of our general look at what our station looks like. as you can see, we have a camera stand that we're able to control the height of the camera. So our zoom stays roughly the same the entire time. We just move the camera up and down. The camera is connected directly to a desktop. So we control everything from the desktop. We have remote viewing, so we're not, messing with the camera other than to turn it on and off. We will place the artifacts on a smaller plexiglass sheet, and will give us easier access to, move the artifact around when we're taking the photos. It provides a place that we can set up the photo away from the camera, so we're not working directly on top of our camera station the entire time. As well as the studio light, we're able to move that around to, control the lighting. If we have an artifact that, the light is, it will provide better light if the light is, beneath it as opposed to on the side. We're able to control that as well. So the steps we usually take, this is one of our former technicians setting up one of his shots. You can see he has the artifact on a smaller piece of plexiglass. We raise the artifact up so that, plexiglass does scratch pretty easily. This makes sure that the only thing in focus is the artifact itself. We have a scale on all of our pictures that we make sure is level with the artifact itself, so that they're both in focus at the same time. You can see our standing station has a very, very heavy arm that we're able to control the camera with. Our seated station is much lighter and sort of easier to manage, as well as the studio light over here and the light underneath. Once the photos are taken, or once a photo is taken, we're able to look at it on the desktop to, make sure that the only things visible are the artifact and not the eraser, or not the, whatever's in the background, any dust, anything. So this is a photo of our seated station as well. And this allows us to, take multiple pictures of the same artifact easily. And so it's a way to, being able to look at it with remote viewing saves us a lot of time. You can sort of see any blemishes that are on the photos as well before we put the artifact back. So if you have any questions, I will be glad to answer. I will say that Dave Norline with FDI Precision Photography has helped us set up our photography lab for each of our labs. He, I believe, did a workshop with SAA this year. And so he has helped us a lot. If you have, please follow the Veterans Curation Program on Facebook and Instagram. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. That came in at 10 minutes. Thank you so much. And I also want to tell the audience that we used their directions to set up a photo studio at St. Mary's College, and it seriously has transformed our visual documentation. So are there any questions for Scott about setting up a station like this? Raise your hand or chat. There is a question in the chat. what sort of throughput can you achieve? How many items per hour?
So it depends on the technician. It depends on what artifacts we're taking pictures of. And, you know, with anything, usually with a good technician, we're taking pictures. So we take 2 photos of each artifact, 3 if it's, you know, a projectile point or like a rim sherd. We will usually get, I want to say maybe 7 or 8 artifacts a day for a good technician. It does take a few weeks to sort of get up to getting things going, but once folks are, you know, really moving quickly, they can do a pretty good output each day.
Someone in chat asked, are you using reflectance transformation imaging in your lab, and in what situations?
I do not know the answer to that. Sorry. Yeah, we do. No, we usually, yeah, sorry, I don't know the answer to that one. I can look into that for you.
Are there other questions or comments? And while we're waiting, maybe one of the things that was really useful to St. Mary's College, Scott, was when Erin was there and she made a laundry list of materials for us to buy. And maybe if people are interested in what you've done, they could contact you through your email down below to ask for the same.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I'd be happy to help folks if they're interested.
Okay, well, it looks like one of my classes where everybody's being very quiet. And those of you who are new to Zoom, raise your hand, you go into reactions, which is at the bottom of the board or the bottom of the screen, and you can see raise your hand. So thank you very much, Scott, for your presentation. Oh, wait a minute, we have a question. What is the cost per station?
I don't know the cost off the top of my head, but I can, if you want to send me an email, I would be happy to get a breakdown for you.
And I'll tell you what we ordered from you that you all had recommended was about $3,500. That was a couple of years ago, so the cost could have increased.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next speaker, and is also a Scott, and that is Scott Strickland from St. Mary's College, and he's going to be talking about low, no-cost mobile data collection.
All right, Julie, can you see this? Because I know sometimes when I try to share my screen, it doesn't work.
No, I'm good. This is not that other Brand X program. This is Zoom.
All right. Well, let me preface my presentation by stating that the things I'll be talking about, there are more robust methods for mobile data collections, methods that require investment in software and hardware. So some of you watching may be using those methods, but this presentation is not for you. This presentation is for those in a pinch who may need easy access to tools for collecting digital data, or for people who are super cheap or frugal like me. So I present to you low or no cost mobile data collection techniques that I've used with only tools that I already had. I'll be highlighting specifically the collection of spatial data and plotting of coordinates. So most everybody carries a phone with them at all times. Most everyone will have a phone with built-in GPS capability. The GPS on your phone is just about as accurate as some older handheld GPS units you may have used back in the day. There are many different ways to view GPS coordinates from your phone. In iOS and Android, this may come in the form of the preloaded Compass app, like I show here at the far left. Other methods of getting coordinate data, depending on your needs, can come from other free apps, such as Other examples I'm showing here, one's called GPS Recorder and the other one called GPS Plan. Each one gives coordinates. One of the apps shows relative accuracy as a number, while another shows like direction of available satellites. Some of you may also wear a fitness tracker or smartwatch that has GPS functionality. These can be very useful because they're wearables that you don't have to reach for. I wear an Amazfit BIP fitness tracker by the company Xiaomi, which has its own dedicated GPS that can operate independent of linking to your phone. This particular watch is pretty cheap, only set me back about $60. And I bought it solely because it has like a 45-day battery life, and it has that built-in GPS functionality. You can pick up similar models very cheap. Sometimes even the grocery store Aldi has one that looks identical. Comparing the results of the GPS readings from the 3 phone apps and the smartwatch, we can see how coordinates compare when plotted. Shown in red is the actual location where I took the coordinates. Note, however, that I gave myself a less than ideal scenario by not giving the receivers time to adjust while under tree cover and between 2 somewhat tall buildings which obscured satellite reception. So it's still not bad. In an open field, performance would be much better. A simple scenario where you might use these resources would be to record artifact locations from a surface survey. So mind my terrible handwriting. Here I created a basic form that describes artifact at a site while logging coordinates from one of the apps, which can then be transcribed into a spreadsheet containing the coordinate data and artifact counts. And then you can import those coordinates into GIS software to make overall maps. This survey, which covers about 80 acres, took only 2 to 3 days to collect all the data. And for those of you who are curious, we followed it up with systematic shovel testing. And as you can see, the results of surface concentrations and shovel test concentrations were very similar. But what if you had gone for a site visit, but you didn't bring any field records with you because you were called in unexpectedly? Well, there are some other options after the fact. By default, without realizing, your phone links to your built-in camera to location services. So when you take a photo, coordinate data and camera specs are recorded in the image metadata known as exchangeable image file metadata or EXIF data. You can view this on a computer by going to the image file properties as I show here in the middle. You can also view it on the phone through another free app like I show here on the right called EXIF Viewer, and it gives you the coordinates for that image. As I had mentioned in the beginning, there are more robust and streamlined ways of recording spatial data that involve little post-processing and no paperwork. Popular tools include ArcGIS Collector. However, these tools require subscription services. ArcGIS Collector is a $60 a year add-on to existing tiers of subscription services, and the whole subscription model is a little difficult to navigate without talking to a salesperson, but this can get pricey. So in a minimum, you would be spending about $260 a year just to use this app. But keeping in with my theme of being super cheap, who doesn't have time to be juggling all that, there are alternatives that do very similar things. In the past, I've used GIS Cloud's mobile data collection app and service. It too has a subscription plan, but you can use the app for free to collect data with some bare bones functionality, which may be more than adequate as is. To use that, you begin setting up a form for data collection. The first one I ever developed was for a project working with the Rappahannock tribe in Virginia for documenting sites and places important to the tribe's Indigenous cultural landscape. It was a basic form where I wanted to document 3 basic fields: informant, importance of the location, and to attach photos. In the background, I also opted for it to record additional information such as latitude, longitude, altitude, accuracy, and a timestamp. Data can be recorded as points, lines, or polygons, and you can attach other media such as phone audio recordings, QR codes, or even create custom drop-down lists. This app form saved me from juggling notes and multiple devices. I will note that when working with the forms, you can keep the data from being publicly available, which is important for sensitive data like archaeological or ethnographic data. This is what the form I created looks like when you're looking at it on your phone app. It just displays the 3 custom fields I created while others are recorded in the background. You can view all plotted points on the app's built-in map. We repurposed the Rappahannock form that we used and applied it to later work with the Pamunkey tribe as well. And shown here are a bunch of points from the Pamunkey reservation that we recorded. If you tap any of the points on the map, you can pull up the form data in its entirety, including loading any photos that you've attached to it. You can also view the data from a browser on your computer because it's all stored in the cloud, it's all online. From there, you can also view all the data at once as well in a spreadsheet format with thumbnail photo previews. And then you can also use the browser interface to export the data as a CSV file, which can be viewed as either a spreadsheet in Excel or loaded into GIS software. I had taken the data I exported and was able to bring it into GIS software to further process the points. Some of you may have access to ArcGIS software in your work, but if you're just GIS curious without the willingness to spend loads of money, or if you use a Mac instead of a Windows PC, an alternative is the free and open source software called QGIS, which is a software screenshot that I'm showing here with that data. So in summary, your phone can be a very valuable tool for data collection. By default, it records a lot of spatial data, particularly with photos. Storing of this data may be a good thing from a certain point of view. Be aware, though, that there are limitations in the GPS accuracy, especially in less than ideal situations like the one I showed with obscured sky views. There are loads of apps out there, not just the ones I showed, so I encourage you to explore and test some out. And lastly, I will reiterate that some of you may have better methodologies through access to ArcGIS Collector or using Trimble systems or dedicated data collectors, but those can set you back price-wise. What I have shown are just some ideas for free or low-cost solutions that fit in your pocket using the phone you already have that you can use right away. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. That's another presentation that came in at 10 minutes, yay. And we have time, 3 to 5 minutes for questions.
Suggestions for improving accuracy for like the mobile data collector apps. It uses the built-in GPS. I know that you can link up ArcGIS Collector with like an RTK system to get sub-meter accurate or even centimeter accurate data. I haven't tried that because I don't have ArcGIS Collector, but I know you can do that with like some of the cheaper RTK solutions like MLID, Reach systems. I know they link with ArcGIS Collector, so you can get really, really good accuracy with that. And someone asked better accuracy if you have good cell tower reception. So the GPS, it'll operate independently of the cell phone data. You might be aware, like if you're in a building, it'll say like turn on your Wi-Fi for better GPS accuracy. And I've done some experiments where I've turned off like my LTE data and turned it back on and logged the same coordinate over several days to see if there was any difference. And I didn't notice any appreciable difference between having the cell phone data on and just using the GPS standalone by itself.
There's a question from Katie Boyle about would using a hotspot help with accuracy?
I haven't personally tried that, but maybe. Generally, I think the phone is just using the built-in GPS and not trying to triangulate off of the cell phone towers.
Other questions or comments for Scott? I know that when we turned the data over to the Pamunkey tribe at the end of the project, they were very excited to have this record. While it was meaningful to us for writing our report, it was really meaningful for the community that, you know, inherited the data or received the data. I mean, it's actually their data, they provided it. So, and more community archaeology type programs, I think, are going to involve the collection of ethnographic data. So thank you very much, Scott. Big hand on the screen or one of the hands on Zoom. And we'll go ahead and move on to our next presentation. And it is by Greg Katz, Place-Based Narratives in StoryMaps. And I want to give a plug that Greg and Scott are going to be talking about this at the Max as well too, right? So you can, audience might see this as a teaser for that. But anyway, take it away, Greg. I think I made you a co-host.
Okay, yeah, I should be able to. I'm trying to do this on my phone, so hopefully the technology will cooperate. I do want to just sort of tack on one thing to Scott's talk, and that is that there are a number of Bluetooth antennas you can pair with your phone, some of which are pretty low cost, like under $200. That'll get you pretty decent accuracy and can help with some of that using your cell phone for data collection. So let me just see if I can switch over here and show my slides. Screen broadcast, is that gonna work? Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, it's there, looks good.
All right. So a theme in my talk is going to very much echo on what Scott just presented. I'm going to be talking to you today about place-based narratives and story maps, and basically giving you a story maps 101 to help you if you are starting out thinking about creating a story map and different software options that you have when you're trying to explore that. And I guess starting at the beginning with what story maps are, they are focused on places and they're interactive. They present a narrative about the site and they're public facing. So, you know, we as archaeologists are often working on sites and working on different sets of sites, and story maps are a way to present the story of your important place and get it out to the public, and to have text and images and maps all working together to get a story across to the public. And story maps can be an Esri product, the makers of ArcGIS and ArcMap. As Scott was talking about, you know, they are a big company that has a lot of services available that are generally pay for services, and I will get to that in a minute. But story maps can be more than just the Esri product. You could have a blog and a map that was interactive and have that be considered a story map, at least as far as I'm concerned. You could host that either on a web page to itself or in some other format. And I should just make a note about the spelling of StoryMaps. That StoryMap with the two words smushed together is how Esri presents their trademark StoryMap, and they are the people who sort of popularized this concept. You can also spell StoryMap as two words, meaning a more generic presentation of your place-based narratives. So StoryMaps can also be at diverse geographic scales, from regions to sites. So you could, for example, present one that was on, the example I have here is historic iron furnaces in Maryland. You could make one that, sort of covers the whole state and talks about different resources or a specific type of resource of your interest. Or you could also zoom down to a site specifically and have an interactive map with features. So you can click on different features and bring up images and text related to that. And because so much of what we do is with cell phones in our hands, and cell phones are location aware, StoryMaps have that capability too. So you could make a story map about, say, family cemeteries in Prince George's County, and you could use your story map in your phone to navigate to sites, and when you get to sites, pull up information on that specific cemetery. And so it could be considered, a way to, fuel heritage tourism. And then something I've been seeing more and more is that story maps have been part of mitigation packages in a CRM context, which is the world that I work in. And the Park Service in particular has been wanting to put together a lot of story maps, I guess both for mitigation purposes and for not mitigation purposes, but just to convey more information about the important places that the Park Service manages and where the Park Service is doing work. So one of the points I wanted to get across is that there are other options for making story maps than the ArcGIS story maps. One is Northwestern University has a sort of like for like, an alternative version of StoryMaps called Night Lab, and that one is free and online and has a lot of functionality. And then there's also a version that is a little more DIY that's working with Leaflet and JavaScript to add interactive map elements to whatever website you happen to be working on. I do have some links at the back of my slide deck, and when I can figure out how to paste that into chat, I will. So I can present you some links to both StoryMaps and Night Lab, ArcGIS StoryMaps and Night Lab, as well as some leaflet examples. But including the one that Cassandra and I worked on last year for Maryland Archaeology Month. And I don't want to read a whole lot of text to you from slide, but I do want to tell you a little bit about sort of how I see the ArcGIS version of StoryMap as compared to the others. The ArcGIS StoryMaps have a ton of functionality and they look very sleek and slick. But they are very sort of top down in terms of administrative controls and have tight controls on who you can access and how content gets uploaded. And what I have found is that it is very hard to collaborate with people on an ArcGIS story map just because of these tight controls. And that if you go with more open sourced with some of the alternatives, you wind up with much more flexible administrative controls, and you wind up being free or nearly free. This would be a good time to point out that the ArcGIS story maps, they have a free tier, which gives you very, very limited functionality and almost no ability to upload images. I mean, there's a memory storage cap. And if you switch over to, if you want to do more than just the very basic layouts with minimal images, you have to pay, and the fee model can be quite steep. So moving over to one of the open source software options or your DIY option with leaflet JavaScript, you wind up with a lot more controls. You wind up with a number of different pluses and minuses with that. So before I end, I just wanted to mention that if you are planning on, mapping out these places that you think are of great significance and whatever, to not forget that you are, have responsibilities to the site and to site protection. So don't, go mapping out all of the ossuary sites of Maryland at high levels of detail and getting that out to the public. And this is the story map links that I'll have at the back of the slide deck. You can hopefully click on these. The first two are Esri story map examples. One is on segregation and COVID in New York City, which is really fantastic story map. It just won an award on the Esri story map website. It's great. And then some other examples, including the Night Lab and some leaflet and GitHub story maps. So with that, I will leave it there.
Thank you, Greg. Is it possible to bring up the segregation and COVID story map to show the audience?
Yeah, let me see if I can do that here on my phone. Just a second.
Meanwhile, while Greg's doing that, does anybody have any questions or comments?
Is this coming through okay?
I don't see it yet.
Okay, let me see if it's going to be working. Share content, screen broadcast.
And I'm not gonna say anything to Greg while he's working on that, so he doesn't have to. He's okay. It looks like he's having some success.
I am having some success. If you give me just another minute.
Yeah, you go ahead. But these are some good questions that are coming in. So you go ahead and get what you're doing. Other questions, just put them in the chat box.
So this is showing up as a pop-up, and it's giving you some fewer options. This is about COVID in New York City. Julie, do you want to read a question to me since I can't?
Sure. The first one is from Craig Lukasik, and it says, these are not full GIS programs, correct?
They are not really GIS programs. The Esri story maps is through their ArcGIS online interface, and so it has a lot of GIS built into it. So in this example I'm showing you, this is, what does that say? Quarantine. So percent of positive COVID cases for by zip code in New York City. And so it has a lot of, it's pulling in a lot of online GIS data sources. I don't know how live these, how much if you were linking to data sets, it would refresh, or how much of them are static images. But there is a whole lot of, since it's in the ArcGIS online universe, there is a whole lot of online mapping that's sort of embedded into this Esri story map websites, while the alternatives are, I guess you could consider them a GIS, but they have much more limited functionality. The leaflet and story maps, the leaflet and JavaScript story maps that we were doing through GitHub, you have point data that's on a Google sheet, and it is refreshing that data as time goes by. So if you add new points for more cemeteries in Prince George's County, for example, there will be more dots displayed on the map the next time it is loaded. So you could consider that a GIS, but it's not a full-blown GIS in the sense that you might be asking, Craig.
Brent Chippendale, excuse me, asked, how steep is the learning curve for something like not nightly?
Let me see if I can just switch off of this for a second. For nightly, I went to it and signed up and started creating a map and pointing and clicking, and live broadcast has stopped. Okay. And the I found it pretty easy to just navigate and point and click through it. I think it's pretty user friendly, and people who are novices and aren't GIS users can create pretty nice story map through the nightly. If you want to be working, doing coding with Leaflet and JavaScript, I think, you know, the learning curve is pretty steep, at least for, I guess I could call myself an old timer. Somebody like me who's just not used to coding and web pages. It was, you know, Cassandra and I wound up, I think, recruiting her son to help us with some of the coding parts because it got pretty difficult pretty fast.
Any other questions or comments for Greg? And a reminder that this conversation will continue at the Max. Do you know who developed that segregation in COVID? Was it students? Was it, I mean, was it a project?
It was a whole consortium. If I can get I'll switch over to my computer when I'm done presenting and see if I can actually copy and paste the link in so you guys can all have it. There was a nonprofit group that was working to try to, shed light on how race and race in particular in New York City was having public health effects. And so I came across that particular story map when I was looking through the collection that ArcGIS StoryMaps has for last year's award winners. And there is a good bit of data on who created it, and it's up on the StoryMap website. But it was a nonprofit group that I think had some funding and did a whole lot of work with demographics in New York City and different measurements of public health and race. And it was anyway. So I think that answers your question.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and give you a big hand. Hopefully everybody else is giving a big silent hand with on mute. And we're going to go ahead and move to our next presenter, and that is Brian Crane. And the title of his presentation is "What do we learn from photogrammetry and 3D modeling?"
Okay, good morning. So I'll start my timer so I can keep track, and let me share my screen. Mostly what I'm going to be sharing is models that I've uploaded to the web, and then some slides. Okay, sharing screen. So let's hope this works.
It should.
Share. All right, so there we go. Okay, so okay, so just some examples of photogrammetry models, and what I got out of it. So this is an image of this is a headstone from the Cook family burial ground. And actually, let me quickly drop in at the slide PowerPoint. So hopefully you're seeing a photogrammetry object slide. Is that what people are seeing? Great. So on the left, you see the headstone, photograph of the headstone. On the right, the photogrammetry model. So the headstone is really hard to read. Even if you're looking at it, it's very hard to photograph so that you can share it so people can read the inscription. But even if you're looking at it in the field, it's not very easy to do. So this is the 3D model. And why is my mouse not showing up? That's frustrating. There's my mouse. All right. So and I can zoom in, and by rotating the model, you can kind of scroll around and sort of have light coming from raking angles. And I've taken the color off, and I've kind of put a texture on it that kind of exaggerates the relief and makes it shiny. I mean, obviously that's not how it looks, but it helps you read. So and some cool things that we find from this. All right, so The main inscription is easy enough to read, but this lower inscription, "May he rest in peace, amen," is a little harder in person. And also something that I noticed from the model that I didn't even see in the field is down here in the lower left-hand corner, you can see there's another name, Rutherford. Is probably the stone carver. And I didn't even see that when I was looking at the thing, when I was like, sitting in front of it, because it was covered in lichen and kind of subtle. And then also you'll notice from the model, you see these concentric circles. Oh, that was not what I wanted to do. Sorry, I have to keep remembering how to navigate. So up here, the surface is smooth, but if we look down at the bottom of the model, you can see there are these overlapping concentric circles, and presumably that's related to a saw or a sander that was used to process the stone. So the photogrammetry is preserving and allowing you to show some information about the manufacture of this headstone, both the stone carver and something about the method involved. Okay, so how do I get that out of the way? There we go. So this is another example. Julie will be familiar with this. This is a small object that I think was found at St. Mary's City, if I'm getting that right. No, I'm getting that wrong, Julie. Julie can correct me later, but this was a what's-it. And we were hoping actually to sort of like distort the thing virtually, which you can kind of do. It didn't work as well as we wanted. But the really cool thing was that I shared this with Sarah Cofield Rivers. And while Sarah had seen a photograph of it previously, just like a static photograph, just from the photograph, she wasn't sure what it was either. But when I showed her the thing in 3 dimensions, she had this, oh, I know exactly what that is. It's a pipe tamper. And so here's an example on the left. It's from a site in Britain. It's a 17th century example, and you can even see some of the imagery on the face of it. Is they see like that star. It's like star and horseshoes on the one that Julie had, and it looks like maybe the handle has been broken off, but it's pretty clearly what it is. So just by being able to share on a phone, I think I might have been at a CfMA meeting. I was able to show on a phone and rotate the model. It was much easier to figure out what in the heck this was. And wait for my mouse to come back. Come back, mouse. This is why does my mouse disappear when I all right. I had my mouse for a second. This is probably, well, there we go. That worked, even though I couldn't actually see my mouse. So here's another example of a photogrammetry model. So this was a column-aware pot from South Carolina, and a lot of the sherds mended, but the 2 big chunks did not mend. But you could tell it was very likely this is all, from like a single excavation unit. So you could tell that they mended together, but there wasn't really an easy way to do that physically. So, I did photogrammetry of the individual chunks, and then I brought them into Autodesk Maya and, arranged them virtually, and then reconstructed a virtual pot to work or to show around them. And so from that, I was able to calculate the diameter of the opening and do a little bit of math to estimate the volume of this pot. So in terms of what we could learn, where we had just 2 chunks of a pot, well, now we've got a guesstimate of what the thing might have looked like and an estimate of its volume that we didn't have before. All right, we're gonna, oh, now I have my mouse back. That's cool. So one last one. This is not photogrammetry, but this is actually from LiDAR. This LiDAR data that a lot of LiDAR data is available for free now, and you can manipulate it with free software, Cloud Compare. I have a blog post that I can share where I talk a little bit about how you get from, like, because the LiDAR data, it might have everything like the trees and everything else that you want to get rid of, down to the bare earth. So I got down to the bare earth, and then this is a Civil War era map, Corps of Engineers map for the area around Washington, D.C. And this is like 40th and Allen is one of the forts, circle forts around Washington. And superimpose on the current topography, you kind of get a much better sense of how the fort was situated on the high ground near the chain bridge. I can share this URL in the chat, but this is I've got a little bit of an explanation of how I went from that's what the LiDAR data looked like to sampling that down to get the bare earth, and then getting the historic map draped over on top of it. But it is something that you can do with a shareware. Let's see, let's go. I'm just sort of jumping around here. So we had someone asked about reflectance transformation imaging, RTI. Here's an example, another headstone from the Cook family burial ground in Montgomery County. So RTI, you've got the camera fixed, but you move a light source around from different angles. And then the software, it's actually free software, allows you to create a single composite image, and you cast a raking light around it. So this inscription is actually not so hard to read, but there are parts of it that, like this date, the year, is a little bit wonky. But if you move it's 1847, and the 7 is kind of, the surface is sort of spalled off. But if you move the light around, you can see, oh wait, now I can see this 7 where maybe I couldn't before. So that's what RTI is about. It's about exposing subtle relief that is hard to read in person, and you get all these different filters that you can use. And here's something called static multi-light. So it's really hard to get a photograph of this headstone where the inscription actually really pops out. But this static multi-light virtual composite image makes this an image that really, wow, the inscription really pops out, and you can even see that 7, that hard to read 7 comes out. The V in the missing November comes out. So that's you're helping to be able to read inscriptions that you couldn't before. Another example, here's another headstone. Good luck with trying to create an image of, because it's right up against the fence railing, and it's covered with lichen. Oh gosh, it's really hard. How are you going to read that? But do the photogrammetry of it. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Pull off the color, and now you get this really crisp image, and wow, you can actually read it. She lived in the exercise of every Christian grace and virtue, and departed thence in the triumph of faith. You can read that. You could never read that from the photograph that I took. Ripping through these, because how am I doing on time? I'm probably about out of time. Yes, I'm out of time. Just one last one. This was not photogrammetry. This was doing a totally full-on virtual reconstruction based on engineering plans of 40th and Allen. But we had these photographs of a signal tree. Nobody knew where it was, and maybe a photograph from that signal tree. So using that virtual model of the fort and the cantonment, I was able to reconstruct maybe where those photographs were taken from. So by recreating a probable signal tree, yeah, I was able to recreate the views that seem to be consistent roughly with the model. So be able to guess where the cameras were, and therefore where the tree was. Also, it's experimental archaeology. This is Fort San Felipe and Santa Elena. I worked with Chester de Prater to try to figure out what did the fort look like. And my first reconstruction was no, it can't have been like this. There was no room left for a cannon. So we realized that no, it can't have been, and there was no way to get a cannon up there. So, that's the upper left-hand image. And then so I settled on something more like the lower right-hand image that there would be room for cannon and for people to fire it, and actually a way to get it up there. So anyhow, so it's like experimental archaeology with virtual reconstructions. So stop my share and take questions.
Those were really impressive examples. Are there questions for Brian in the chat or verbal?
Share that one. The blog post I mentioned.
I can't believe there are no questions. Those were amazing. Those were amazing. I mean, it really showed the power. I mean, my question is, what can you come do our stuff, or do you still have your 3D? I know.
I work for the Maryland National Park and Planning Commission, but I did keep Archae 3D LLC as a for side stuff that don't represent a conflict of interest. One cool thing to point out about photogrammetry versus laser stuff: lasers are expensive. Photogrammetry, you just need a decent digital DSLR camera, and a little bit of training on how to take the photographs. And then, the fancy software that lets you scale your model is over $3,000, but the software, AggieSoft software, that doesn't scale, the standard version, is $200. So actually doing photogrammetry is actually not a budget breaker necessarily. So that's worth noting. Oh yeah, so the RTI, that headstone, that's in the field. It's a challenge. Let me tell you what, it's hard to do it in the field because the trick with RTI is that you have to filter out all the ambient light. So if you're outside, you have to filter out all the sunlight. So if you take a photograph, it's black. It's like nothing gets through, right? And then your flash has to be strong enough to get through the filter. And like conventional flashes, just your basic speed light flash, it's tough. So you have to be able to get the flash fairly close, but that means that the camera has to be really close to the object. So you can't do big objects very easily unless you have like a really big, like monster flash that has to have like a generator powering it. So it's hard to do in the field. It's a lot easier to do in a lab where you can just make it dark and just use your flash. But RTI software is free. It's fussy. Taking the photographs is fussy. So how long does it take to process the image? It kind of depends on, for a headstone, for photogrammetry, where maybe you have 20, 30 images, not very long. If you have so photogrammetry is a computer hog. It takes a lot of RAM. So the more, my computer has 32 gigs of RAM, and a fast processor. You can make it work with 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, but the more the merrier. And if you're trying to use it for mapping, like I've mapped sites where I have literally hundreds of photographs. Like I've, Craig, the map for Fort Casimir was, maybe I can share that, real quick. Is like hundreds of photographs. Yeah, and that's what I want to share this. That's right. And then close that. And that can take, yeah. So here's a model of the excavations at Fort Casimir with the virtual fort sort of plunked on top. So that the actual model of the dig there, that was like 700 pictures. And that was computer killer, to do that many. So that can take hours or even days to process. So, but then you get this. So there's the model of, that's the excavations at the end, and we were able to sort of superimpose. Well, here's where we think the front parapet of the wall was on top of them, and how that relates to the actual excavation units and post holes. So, and then an aerial photograph that gives you a sense of like, where is this in real life? and a little Dutch flag up there because why not? So
Brian, we have 2 questions in the chat. We do need to move on, but can you
Yeah,
give
sorry.
quick and dirty answers to the two chat questions?
do you have a different strategy for small objects versus larger objects? Yeah, smaller objects, it's tough because you've got to get the camera as close as you can, but then you're bumping up. You need a wide angle lens actually for photogrammetry to work well. So you're dealing with the minimum focus distance, which makes it a little trickier. But a light box is great, and a little turntable. That's how I did the ring. Well, not the ring. I'm sorry, the pipe tamper. We thought it was a ring. The pipe tamper. Have you used photogrammic images of artifacts for educational purposes in either of the classroom settings or archaeological training purposes? Archaeology training purposes, yeah. I'm trying to train people to do photogrammetry of headstones so I can crowdsource the recordation of at-risk tombstone inscriptions that are just weathering away, we're just losing them to acid rain and erosion. And it's train people to, it's like 21st century tombstone rubbing. Don't go out with the paper that like damages the stone, but taking pictures doesn't. Do you process all photos or break it into chunks? Yeah, so that's sometimes when you've got a whole lot, and like an example where I've got 700 images, yes, breaking it into smaller chunks sometimes makes it manageable, and then line the chunks up with each other. That can sometimes help, yeah. How often do I train people? I've only done it, I did it at SHA's last year. I did Alex Jones helped me set up some training for volunteers in Montgomery County this past fall. I have got some requests, so hoping to do another one, but don't have a date yet. But yeah, we'll get the word out when I do, because there are a lot of people who want to learn how to. Learning how to take the photographs is not that hard. Learning the processing is a pain, I'll have to tell you. But the photographs are not that bad for photogrammetry. It's just a couple tips that you need to understand how to do. Okay, I should probably stop.
Thank you very much, Brian. That was great. Thank you. Verbal clap, and hopefully you're getting lots of silent claps too. Our next to last speaker is Max Sickler from the National Park Service, and the title of his presentation is Using Social Media to Further the Cause.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Looks good.
Great. Okay. Hi, my name is Max Sickler, and I am a program associate for the National Park Service's National Historic Landmarks program. And I will be talking to you this afternoon about using social media to make archaeological information and projects open to public knowledge. So I want to start off this presentation by asking a question. Why should archaeologists and archaeological organizations use social media? The answer is a multifaceted one, and during this presentation, I will explain why social media is really an excellent tool to raise awareness of the preservation of cultural and historic resources. So firstly, creating content on social media can promote a particular archaeological project like excavations and survey work. Social media can also serve as a platform for raising public awareness on the preservation of a site. In my current capacity as a program associate in the National Historic Landmarks program, I develop social media content to showcase new and existing NHL properties. A National Historic Landmark is a property or site that the Secretary of the Interior has designated as being exceptionally important for illustrating some aspect of American history. In this way, a major part of the National Park Service's mission to preserve the nation's cultural resources for the benefit of the American public is realized. Social media content can be used to make the public aware of your organization's missions and efforts to preserve cultural and historic resources. Archaeological projects that are open to the public, like field schools and volunteer opportunities, can all be promoted through social media as well. There is a very dedicated group of social media users in this country that are extremely interested in volunteering for archaeological projects. And social media can be a great way to connect with these groups on platforms like Facebook and Instagram. So what are the best social media platforms to use if you have archaeological content that you want to share with the world? In my experience, Facebook and Instagram are fantastic platforms to send information on cultural resources to the general public. Facebook posts can cover archaeological projects, artifacts, and fieldwork in more depth than content on other platforms. You can also link other visual and interactive content on Facebook posts, including lesson plans and historical narrative story maps. Instagram posts are more photography-based and typically do not include as much text as Facebook posts. Content on this platform can be used to showcase field photographs and artifact images, and even underwater archaeological excavations. When creating content on Instagram, it's good practice to use the best images that you have. While I don't really have that much experience creating content on TikTok, I have heard that some archaeologists in the academic world in North America and Europe are using the platform's short 1-minute video content to highlight interesting artifacts and even some site features that are really cool. So Facebook is an excellent platform to use for raising awareness on archaeological projects. I have found personally that posts on individual archaeological sites and landscapes are often the most popular content on Facebook for archaeology. The post that you see on the right was one I created for the new Hueco Tanks National Historic Landmark in West Texas. Features like rock art, which are featured in this post, are extremely popular with Facebook viewers. Archaeological sites and materials that are connected to specific cultural and demographic groups can be highlighted for National Heritage Months, including American Indian Heritage, Women's History, and Black History Months. So an example of this would be last month for Black History Month, I created a post on Tolson's Chapel and School. It's a new NHL and it represents a Reconstruction era African-American Methodist church in Sharpsburg, Maryland, adjacent to Antietam National Battlefield. Facebook can also be used to highlight educational content for students and teachers. During the pandemic, myself and staff at the NHL program brainstormed ways to provide educators with tools for distance learning. We ended up creating posts that highlight the Teaching with Historic Places lesson plans, which are interactive individual lesson plans that focus on historic sites and archaeological resources. You can also repost content onto your page from other related pages that may have similar operational goals and missions. Instagram is the perfect platform to use if you have really good images of artifacts and fieldwork. You can only include up to 10 images per post on Instagram, unlike Facebook, so each post should contain an exceptional image or images to capture the public's attention. The same type of information and opportunities can be promoted on Instagram as Facebook, including field schools and public presentations. Also, educational materials like lesson plans and short informational videos can also be included on Instagram posts. The post that you see on the right showcases the underwater archaeological fieldwork conducted at Biscayne National Park in Florida. Now that I have discussed the types of posts and content that can be showcased on various social media platforms, I want to show you an example of a Facebook post that I created for the new Lower Pecos Canyonlands National Historic Landmark in Texas and explain why exactly it worked. Firstly, gauging what archaeological topics particular audience groups are interested in is key. For social media accounts tied to the National Park Service, I've experienced that audience members are really interested in sites that have that unique combination of natural and cultural resources, which Lower Pecos Canyonlands, with its rock art and archaic era cliff dwellings, definitely includes. So illustrative and clear images like these, which display the highly detailed pictographs at Lower Pecos, are extremely good at generating interest and viewer interactions. When posting images, it is important that they are as visually clear as possible and contain appropriate captions and photo credits. For this image, it was a bit of a challenge to make the pictographs clear due to the fact that the photo lighting and perspective in the original image file weren't perfect. So you can use photo editors like Photoshop to help you create clear and really visually stimulating content like this. Also, attaching appropriate hashtags at the end of each Facebook post can help ensure that your posts are getting good traffic from viewers that may not even be following your page. So some additional tips for social media content creation. I highly recommend scheduling your content. Facebook and Instagram both have tools that allow you to create content and post at specific times in the future. For Facebook content creators, this can be accessed through the publishing tools feature. In my experience, posts that are published at the end of the week and in the afternoons get more traffic. Once you have posted your content, it's important to continually check comments on the post itself and in your Messenger inbox. Sometimes page viewers have caught mistakes in posts, or sometimes they can even ask follow-up questions that you can answer. Recently, I had an NHL page viewer contact me about dead links that I embedded in a post, and viewers can also alert you to other events. I had another person message me about some of the archaeological excavations at historic Warwick Town in Southern Virginia, and I may post on these in the future. The Page Insights feature on Facebook provides data that allows you to track how much traffic specific posts are attracting. So it gives you graphs and percentages to know how many people are looking and interacting with your posts. This tool is really essential for Facebook. And finally, when you're creating social media content, it's important to remember that each post and image you upload should be accessible to viewers that have accessibility issues. So for government and social media accounts, Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act makes accessible content mandatory for public outreach efforts. So social media, websites that are attached to a federal or state agency. And for Facebook and Instagram posts, this includes images, and it's vital that you develop alternative text for these images. And alternative text is supposed to accurately describe what is portrayed in an image for viewers that use screen readers. Also, for videos that you upload onto Facebook or Instagram, make sure that they include appropriate and accurate audio descriptions and captioning for audience members with any accessibility concerns. So making sure that your posts are accessible to a wide group of people is very important. So thank you. Any questions?
Max, that was great. And that was a great tutorial on what to do and not to do, because a lot of us use Facebook, but there were a lot of things I wouldn't have even necessarily thought about, like scheduling and how to create more traffic. Are there questions from the audience or in the chat box? And there is a question from Scott. Does Park Service do Reddit AMAs as a form of social media engagement?
That's a really good question. I am not familiar if the NPS does Reddit AMAs, but I think that would be a really good way to answer some of the public's questions. So I definitely will pass that on to some people in the NHL program.
Do you want to explain for those of us who don't know what a Reddit
Sure.
AMA is?
Yeah, so Reddit is basically like a message board kind of website that allows people to ask questions on a bunch of different things and make comments. And an AMA is Ask Me Anything. So a lot of times, you know, people, scientists, but also even celebrities, they'll come onto Reddit and they'll say, ask me anything. And then members of the public can ask them questions specific to their expertise. So I think that would actually be a really good way to maybe get some of the staff of the NHL program to get the message out there on what exactly the program does. So thanks for making me aware of that.
There's another question. Do you see
Okay.
it? Have any, it's from Llewellyn Tolman. I hope I didn't butcher your last name. Have any studies been done on how much online activity translates into actual action in the world? A virtual visit later leads to an in-person visit.
I don't know if there's any work being done to connect virtual visits to actual like in-person visits to a national park, but I do know that not just with social media, but also with nps.gov web pages, there is a department in the NPS that tracks how much traffic these pages are getting. And, you know, as you can expect, a lot of these pages are the ones that are getting the most traffic are park-based pages that just provide information on what is at the park and how you can access. It's very visitor-oriented pages that are getting the most hits. So that's a good idea for trying to figure out whether people are actually going to the parks that they're visiting online.
How come does Park Service use Twitter?
We do use Twitter. Yeah, I have not made any Twitter posts. Facebook and Instagram are the main two social media accounts that we use, just because also a lot of historic structures and archaeological sites just lend themselves really well to being photographed and those photos being put on Instagram and Facebook.
Katie Boyle has a question.
Yeah.
She wanted to know, she says she's on a park social media team and she's hesitant to post field photos because they've had issues with looting. So is there guidance, concrete guidance, she asked him, regarding posting about archaeology?
Yeah, good question. I think based on what I've experienced at the National Historic Landmarks Program, the exact location of a lot of archaeological sites should not be given out to the public, like even in NHL nominations, which are write-ups on why the landmark is important and then it eventually becomes designated. Those redact the actual coordinates and locations of the archaeological site. But I think a good way to go is if you have really good artifacts, posting images of those artifacts without any information attached to it on the exact location could be a good way to make sure that people aren't looting.
Do they give you guidance on the artifacts that you can post?
Yeah, I don't know about any written guidance, but I know that there's guidance from specific staff members at the National Historic Landmarks Program that say these are images that can go out. And typically I'm posting on content that has already become a National Historic Landmark. Like the idea is to not post any, location or landmark that doesn't have the official NHL designation. So I don't think that with other park-based social media accounts, you can post anything that's not actual park property or not an NHL designated place or landmark. So those are the limits.
Other questions from the audience? All right, Max, I think that was an excellent presentation. I mean, I am so grateful to all of our presenters for great presentations and coming in under the wire. And our last but not least is Patricia Samford. And I know Trisha's on here. I'm gonna ask her to get set up. Her presentation is and we're bringing it back to Maryland, is digital resources at the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Laboratory.
Hi, everybody. Can you all see me?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, good. Although there's a lot of feedback. Okay. So I've enjoyed everybody's presentations today. I wanted to talk with everybody about digital resources at the Mac Lab. And I think that a lot of this will be old hat to many of you, but perhaps you'll see something today that you hadn't seen before. I'm going to start out on the homepage of Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum and let you know that if you scroll down right here on the right-hand side, you'll see a section entitled Online Research. And most of the things that I'm going to talk about today are linked right here on this side. So it's easy to get to everything. So one of our first, actually our first initiative was something that Julie King did when she was director of the Mac Lab, the archaeological collections in Maryland. And at the time, these were considered 30 of our most significant collections in curation at the Mac Lab. And we chose a variety of different types of sites, prehistoric sites, domestic sites, industrial and military sites, and every field record, every field photo, artifact photos, archaeological reports, all of it has been scanned and available for all of these 30 sites. So this is a very comprehensive tool for 30 sites. You can actually do research sitting at your computer. But we want you to come to the Mac Lab. So we got funding from Maryland State Highways Transportation Enhancement Grant back in 2013. And late in 2016, we launched Maryland Unearthed, which is a guide to the phase 2 and phase 3 collections that we have in the Mac Lab. In 2016, when we launched the site, we had 268 sites. Now there are 307 sites that are included in this tool, over 4,500 features and intact strata. And you can look at this data in a variety of different ways. And essentially what we want to do is provide a tool for the collections that are at the Mac Lab so that people will know a little bit better about what we have and what they want to ask us to see. So you can look by map. So say if you were interested in Queen Anne's County, you could just click there and you would come up with all of the sites that are in this database from Queen Anne's County. If you click this little plus sign here, you would get a list of all of the features that are available from this Bennett's Point site. Uh-oh, that's not good. Hold on, let me make sure my computer is plugged in. All right, there we go. And then you can also search the database. And if you do, I'm going to do an advanced search. So I would say if I wanted to see all of the privies from Baltimore City, you can see that there are 61 features from 13 sites in Baltimore City. And if I click on 18 BC 27, you can see all of those features. You can see what type of feature it is. Oops. And then you can also see a site summary if you click on the site summary. If you click on a feature, you can get information about that feature, what it is. It's a privy. There are 2,900 artifacts that have been cataloged. The feature dates from the 1850s to the 60s, and any types of specialized analysis that have been done. Glass vessel counts, ceramic vessel counts, faunal analysis, paleobotanical analysis. So it gives you a really deep dive into the features and intact strata layers for features from 307 archaeological sites that are curated at the Mac Lab. Everybody's probably familiar with diagnostic artifacts in Maryland. You see that we have a variety of categories: prehistoric ceramics, projectile points, colonial, post-colonial ceramics, small finds. Sarah Rivers-Cofield has done a lot of work with these types of artifacts that are found in small quantities, not that they're necessarily small. Table glass, small finds includes things like bodkins, toothbrushes, bottle seals, bridle bosses. And if you click on a category, you can see essays that are associated with it that will provide you with some dating and identification information. And then you can look at the different types of bottle seals. You'll get thumbnails here. You can click on those and get a larger photograph with more information about those. So now I'm trying to figure out how to get to, all right, I'm going to click out of this so I can get to my next category. So the exciting thing that's going on right now is that while we think that this is a great tool, we want to make it even better. We would like to make diagnostic artifacts in Maryland mobile friendly and also searchable. So we've been working with Greg Brown up at MHT in Crownsville to get this done. This is a big, long-range, long-term project. Let me show you a little bit about how it's going to work on this beta site. So if you click on a category on marbles, for example, I'm going to go into porcelain marbles. You will see all of these tags here. All of these tags will be searchable. So if I wanted to see all of the artifacts, and again, we just have marbles in at this point. If I wanted to see all of the artifacts, the painted porcelain artifacts with bullseyes, I could click there and it would show you all of the bullseye marbles. If you wanted to see every archaeological artifact from site 18 BC 27 feature 30 on the Diagnostic Artifacts website, then you would click that and it would sort. So you can sort by material, you can sort by decoration, just any of these tags. And what makes it great is that we can add to these tags at any time if we come up with a new way or a new thing that we want to sort on. So again, this is, and again, there'll be a search capability over here as well. So we're still working this out. We're very excited about it. And I think that this is going to make it a lot stronger tool. We've got 2 new categories that are going to be ready to go for this, thimbles and jaw harps. And then Sarah has been working on equestrian artifacts as well. Back around 10 years ago, we worked with Justine McKnight and Martin Gallivan to create the Maryland Archaeobotany website. There are 132 sites from around all over Maryland where you can go and get site summaries. You can search the database and search for particular types of remains. You can search for different time periods, different localities. And then there are also reports from all of these sites included as well. So you can get the full paleobotanical reports as well. And then I do want to focus as part of our pandemic response, we were asked to create video resources for folks. And so between April and say September of this year, we created a number of big short videos. And in particular, I want to call your attention to Site Tour Saturday. We've got, we have got 8 videos from 4 different archaeological sites on the park. And then things that might be more non-park specific are STEAM Sunday videos. These are like 5 to 8 minute videos on things like soil composition, how to use Munsell books, some conservation topics like electrolytic reduction, mending, archaeobotany. Justine McKnight came and we went to Justine McKnight's house and filmed her, which is great. One on dendrochronology, some faunal with Brad Hatch. So those are some of the things that are available for folks. And I think I've about used up my 10 minutes. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Tricia, chat or verbal?
This is all old hat.
It's what?
Old hat. Everybody's seen this stuff. Are there sites or organizations that are models or leaders? Wait a minute, I didn't get the whole question. Let me look. For using digital media in all aspects of their work. Montpelier has a no paper Esri mapping system for all its metal detection and archaeological surveys. I don't know the answer to that question. Does anybody else?
Well, I mean, I would say that I'm certainly not, with enough computer fails and crashes and data disappearing and bad connections, I'm not ready to say I would depend totally on digital, but I will leave that to my colleagues. Maybe Scott has something to say about it. I have a question, Tricia, and I know that it's more of an MHT question, but one of the things that would be really great is if site reports were scanned and made available. I realize they can't be made available to everybody, but you've got some scanned, and DHR has this program where if you go down there and they have a site report that you want, but that is not digital, if you come down there and scan it for them, or scan it, you know, for yourself, really, that's how they're doing some of their scanning. It's just struck me as very basic and very on the cheap, to use Scott Strickland's, but also very effective. I mean, do you know, and I know you don't speak for MHT, but do you know of anything like that since you are a trust employee?
So oddly enough, I was late I couldn't come to the early part of the CfMA meeting because I was in an MHT Committee of Archaeologically Related People, CARP meeting. So COVID has been, the pandemic has been bad in so many ways, but for MHT, what has happened is that because people have not been able to come into the library at MHT, the librarian has been getting lots of requests for digital reports. And so they have been scanning reports like crazy. They reported this morning that they've got about 30% of the reports so far have been scanned, and they're going to work to get many, many more done so that they will be digitally available to archaeologists. And they have also are talking about a way that that people can download those, a website connection with, I believe, Medusa, so that people can, or the Synthesis Project, so that people can actually download those reports themselves. So there'll be links to reports. So it's actually a pretty timely question, Julie.
That's fabulous. Other questions or comments? It looks like you've got a lot of people saying things look great, but are there any other questions by the audience members? Well, if not, that concludes the program. And I want to go ahead and I'm going to stop recording, and I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie as president of COMA. Thank you all. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, audience members, for some really interesting questions. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.